I'm a big fan of watching the Blue Angels. And if you ever watch them and you hear them speak, they'll talk about after every flight, they all walk into a room and they take off their rankings, right? Because they
Right.
have to go through an assessment of how close were they, what was the mistake. Because every one of them, even after a show, there's always something. Oh, I got too close here, I got too far there, whatever it is. And so they have to do that. And I think we need to find a way to mentally have that approach with ourselves and try not to take it so personally.
So, just speaking of the that example, like, do you think the Blue Angels practice before going for the show?
Oh, ridiculously.
Okay.
Ridiculous. Like there's a thing on Netflix right now about the Blue Angels, and it's 100% that, and it shows them, and they actually start, and they're actually bringing in the new Blue Angels versus the ones who are just leaving because it's like a 2 year stint, right? I
Right.
think, or maybe a 1 year stint. And they first start and they start flying their patterns, and they're like 3 or 4 or 5 feet apart, and then the next day they go in and they're like this far, and then they get closer and closer, right? So
Yeah.
they can figure out these challenges and
So
figure out where they can get better.
one problem I have with sales is I think of it as the Blue Angels or as a sport, and we only practice live in front of the customers. Because if we tell a salesperson take an hour to practice this with the SE, that's an hour away from being in front of the customers, and they hate it.
But that's not true either. That's can I BS on here? Like
You can,
that's not true.
you can.
There is no salesperson that is that busy that they can't find time. They will
Oh
make
yeah,
every
I agree
excuse in
with
the book.
that.
Yeah. So
I
I agree with you 100%. And I love what you said is like if you're only practicing during your actual sales conversations, you're not going to be a good salesperson ever.
okay. So, so how do you like, have you been able to convince salespeople to practice?
Well, I mean, that's my job. Like that's what I do, right? And
Okay,
like I'm a sales trainer, so I teach
right.
them how to say things and what to say and when to say it. And then also
Okay,
the most important thing is how do they do it in a way that's authentic to themselves?
okay.
Because I'll walk in and I'll say, "Hey, here's how you say this," but that's how Richard says it. And then I flip it and say, "How do you say it?" And the other piece I remind salespeople all the time is that I love sales scripts. They're fantastic. And I preach to them constantly. And what I also tell salespeople is, I don't want you to ever sound scripted. Well, the only way you sound scripted is because you haven't practiced it enough. Because I'd be willing to bet every salesperson I know says certain parts of their pitch, certain parts of the demo, the exact same way, the exact same phrase, and the exact same, you know, you know, iambic pentameter, whatever the Shakespearean, flow of English language was, right? How they spoke. But they do that. And I'm like, they're just mini scripts. So don't tell me scripts are bad. But this goes back to what you said. Well, it's because you got to practice
Yeah.
more. So for me, it's a lot of role playing. It's a lot of what I call real playing when I do training. It's a lot about, well, here's how I say it. By the way, tell Richard he's full of it and what should be said better. Like I never walk in saying I know it all. Like I can come in and I can run a discovery call better than just about anybody I know. Don't turn around and ask me to pitch your product 100%. Not going to happen. I don't know it. I don't have that intimacy that you have with it yet. I
Yeah.
can do a pretty decent job, but I won't know the ins and outs. So
Yeah.
for me, that's
Okay.
the piece is in there. So,
Okay.
I
So
also the other thing I'll say too is I'd be curious to your opinion. Yeah, I think you're younger than me, but you're not 25, right?
no, I'm not. I
So
wish, but no.
yeah, me too. Um, Generationally, it's getting easier for people to practice. I think the younger generations, the millennials, very much so, the Gen Zs, are all about practice and repeat and role playing because they desire that level of coaching because they see it as coaching. I'm a Gen Xer. That level of coaching, I would have thought was micromanagement.
Hmm.
So I'm
I haven't
curious. Do
noticed
you
that.
see that? I mean,
I haven't
do you
noticed
see it's
that.
easy? Okay. Okay.
I haven't noticed that per se. I think it might be that millennials and Gen Zers want it, but I don't think the management is there.
That I agree with. So this goes
Yeah.
back to what we are talking about before. It's like, what is management getting wrong? Is that everything they were taught is wrong.